Today we're going to walk through several things, and we're going to familiarize you a bit with the system for award management, and then we're going to help you understand how to take what used to be in CCR and make sure that you're able to control your own data and go from there. Like Kelly said, the simple outline is 3 tasks. Not a huge amount of work, but there is a lot to cover, so we will go slowly and make sure that you get it, but at the same time, we do have a lot to cover, so we will move quickly through the material, which is a contradiction. The first task we will go through is just how to create a user account. If you're going to do anything in SAM and if you want to perform any work, you do need to have a user account. There's certain required information that you'll want to have on hand. It's pretty straightforward. It's not a whole lot of information, but just the basics to set up your user account. And when you're completed with that, you'll have an active user account, and then you can move on to the next step. The second task we're going to cover today is how you would actually take this individual user account that you now have and connect it to a record that you used to have in CCR, and that's really what we're going to focus on. With that, you would need to know the email address that you used to manage the legacy system account, what you used to have in CCR, or have that on hand. And then at the end of task 2, your goal is that you have this brand new SAM user account, and that user account has permission to access and to edit your existing record. And then task 3, we will actually go into the SAM demo site, and I'll walk you through updating a record. This demonstration is going to be focused on contractors as opposed to grantees. Obviously, there are many types of users who use SAM. We will do later webinars that deal more with the grants and financial assistance users to address some of their questions. Today is the second contractor-focused one, so you will see me going through things that are more specific to the contractor and procurement community than to the federal financial assistance. So moving into task 1, creating a user account. We wanted to kind of give you the background, why do you need an account? Who needs an account? Do I need to create an individual account or a system account? There can be some confusion, so let's just run through the basics. Anyone who wants to save search queries, if you have some thing that you do every week, every month, whatever it is, and you're searching for specific kinds of entities and you want to save that search query, you can create a SAM user account just to do that. It'll save the search query. You don't have to worry about re-entering it, and you can run that query whenever you need to. But it's not going to be connected or associated to any entity record. You won't have any permission to update a registration. So really it's just a convenience tool without any power. If you want the power, and you want to be able to create or manage a registration record, and you're aiming to do business with the federal government, you're going to need to create the individual user account and then go through the steps in task 2 to link that account so that the system, systems really are as smart or stupid as just a system, and you need to tell that SAM how to find your previous record. So you want to make sure that your user account is linked to your record. And then there's an entire category of things that federal government users need to do when they're verifying an entity's registration status. So if they're trying to see, do you have an active registration? They need to have an account to do that because that gives them access to additional information. So just to summarize, there are 2 types of accounts. More than likely, you will never need to worry about a system account. What you are looking at is the individual user account. It's tied to you. Your username can't change. The account itself could go with you if you changed organizations or changed email addresses. But if you move organizations, the access and roles would stay assigned to the organization. You wouldn't be able to access previous records. The system account really is just for contract writing systems, federal government systems that are pulling data from SAM and using it as part of the acquisition and award management process. So you probably never have to worry about that. Focus on the individual account, and I'll now walk you through how you would get one. So when you go to sam.gov, and you can see the address right there, it is just www.sam.gov, and that's how you know you're at the right website. you will see the home page, and please remember that SAM is the official U.S. federal government website. It is free. There is no cost to register your entity, to create a user account. This is a free website. This system is required by the federal government, and so therefore we're providing it to you as a service. When you go to SAM, you see the three boxes. You can click the Create an Account link in one of two places, at the top right-hand corner, or the big button that says Create User Account. And when you go to the next page, it'll give you the two options. You can create an individual user account or a system account. And again, focus on the individual. This is if you want to register and update and maintain a record within SAM, this is what you want to do. When you go next, the personal information that SAM asks you for, if you remember the required information I talked about at the beginning, very, very straightforward. Just your first name, last name, the email address. You will need to confirm it. And please make sure that you do get this correct, because this is the email address that SAM will use to contact you, whether it's about password expiration or to validate your account. This is what will be associated, and this is what the system will use. So that email address is very important. Phone, for purposes of contact as well, country, and that's really it in terms of what you need to provide for personal information. Your username is set. Once you've created your username, it can't be changed. It also can't be reused. So even if you deactivate your account later, that username is still it's reserved. It'll never be reused. So you've got your username. The system will tell you if you meet the different requirements for lengths and security and that kind of thing. And then you're going to create your password. And as you fill in your password, the system will tell you whether you've met the character length, if it has a number, if it has a letter, and if it has a special character, so that you don't have to guess and see if the password is correct. You confirm the password, and then you're going to move on to the security questions. The security questions will be used if you forget your password, if you need to reset something. It will allow you to respond to one of the security questions, and then the system will help you update whatever information you were trying to do. They're pretty straightforward. Obviously, you want to write them down and keep them somewhere where you can access them. At that point, you've provided the system with all the information it needs to create an individual user account. You're going to review the information, again, focusing mostly on the email address because that's really the key point. You're going to, again, check your user security questions to make sure that you've got those on hand in case you need them later. And then you're going to submit. And when you submit the individual account request, you get a little confirmation screen, but you'll notice the bold text there. SAM is sending you an email to the address that you gave so that we can confirm that you have access to that email account. There's a 48-hour time limit on the email, so you do need to activate it within that time, or you have to start over. So you go to your email, and you find, look, there's my welcome email. You open it up. It tells you what your username is, and it gives you the link where you need to click, or you can copy and paste and put that link into your internet browser, and that will allow you to go back to the login portal. And at this point, you'd enter your email address or your username and password and log in. And now you have actually activated your account. You will accept the user agreement, reading all the fine print, of course. And now you're in SAM. You've got the My SAM welcome page. You can read different bits of information. You can explore the website. But you don't have any access or permissions to any specific entity record at this point. So you've got an individual user account. It's very nice, but you still need to get roles or permissions to an entity. And that's where task 2 brings us into migrating your legacy account permissions from CCR into SAM. So what do you mean by migrate? We're not talking swallows flying home for the winter. We're talking about taking data that lived in CCR, that now lives in SAM, and making sure you can access it. So you had a registration record in CCR. That was the actual information that you updated every year about your entity. And in terms of terminology and words that we use, entity means any firm or organization or business or sole proprietor or a grantee or federal agency doing business with another federal agency, any registrant that needs to be in SAM for the purposes of doing business that's represented by a DUNS number, by that 9-digit unique DUNS number. So you need to now connect your brand new SAM individual user account to your registration record so you can manage it. There's a couple different ways you can do this. The easiest is hopefully you were the one who used to manage your record in CCR and you created your individual user account in SAM using that same email address. If that's the case, SAM will recognize that and it will present you, it'll make it very easy for you to get to your record. If you were the one who used to manage your registration in CCR, but you use a different email address now, your company upgraded their email servers, now you have a different extension. You can still get to your old record, you just have to know what the old email address was. It'll allow you to search, and I will walk you through that in a second. If, however, the person who used to manage your record is either no longer with your company or has moved on, and you don't have access to the email address, and you've got no way of knowing how to get to that old registration record, you need to contact the Federal Service Desk. The website is there and the phone number 866-606-8220 to get help accessing the record. There are some questions they will ask to verify that you are authorized to access that record, and then you'll be connected to it. So let's take a look at what this would actually look like. You'd see at the top of your MySAM welcome page there where it asks you, would you like to migrate a legacy system account? Obviously you want to say yes. It will then say which of the systems, because SAM incorporates the functionality of what several systems used to do, so the Central Contractor Registration System, the Federal Agency Registration System, and the Excluded Parties List System. There's another system called the Online Representations and Certification Application, ORCA, that is now part of SAM as well, but it did not have individual account permissions, so there's nothing to migrate. In this case, we're going to go with CCR, Central Contractor Registration. In this case, our demonstration here, you've got, we did not provide the email address, we didn't register with the same email address. So you're going to tell it what the email address you want it to look. So when you enter the email address, it'll say, oh, all right, here you are. We do recognize that, and it'll allow you to migrate it over. And then it just confirms it. It says, look, you are CCR. You're migrating your permissions from that. The username you're using is the same. And here's your email address. At that point, you submit. And you're done. Now, if perchance you entered an email address that was not the email that you used to use in CCR, you would get an error message. And it would tell you that, look, SAM, we can't find this email address in the big table of list of user information we have from CCR. We can't match that email address to any previous user account. If you have this happen, you want to make sure you haven't already migrated it and you're not just getting an error because it's already been migrated. But if you really haven't, then you would need to call the help desk. So at this point, we are actually going to back out of the presentation, and I'm going to share my screen with you as we move into the actual demonstration of the system. Please stand by just for a moment while I bring up the internet browser. All right. You should be able to see now the SAM staging environment. This is going to be a live demonstration. So we will walk through and see the actual system, and we're going to update an entity record. So give me just a moment to log in. And of course, being a good person, I read all of the fine print. All right, we are now inside the SAM staging environment. This is what SAM looks like. And for purposes of demonstration, I've set up a fake company. It is not associated with any real company. It has a fake DUNS number, it has a fake TIN, it has a fake everything. So as we're walking through, don't worry that any information is being revealed about a real firm. So my organization, we're going to call it Gorman Manufacturing, was registered in CCR, and I know that I need to update it every year. And I also am aware that in July of last year, SAM replaced CCR and FedReg and ORCA and EPLS, and so now I know I need to do that update in SAM. I want to access and update my registration. It's not expired yet, but I know it will. So for purposes of this discussion, it is going to be active. When you look at what the options are underneath Register and Update Entity, you would see that you've got a complete registration, incomplete, and inactive. Complete is any registration that's either active or has been submitted. Incomplete is some sort of work in progress. You've started it, but it's not finished. You haven't actually submitted it yet. It's in some stage of the update process. And then inactive is fairly self-explanatory. It's expired. So my firm here, Gorman Manufacturing, this is me. So I confirm just my basic information. I see my DUNS number, my address, and that I am still active. So we're going to go ahead and update this entity. Now SAM does email you at certain points prior to your record going inactive, but it's going to email the last point of contact from CCR. So if you don't have a user account associated with it, the expiration notice may not get to the right person. So if you have a record in CCR, you may want to check and see what its status is in SAM. So the first thing you're going to do, and there was a good deal of information on the My SAM page that explained what it is you would need to get started, is take a look at your purpose of registration. Now the purpose of registration is why you're here. Are you trying to get contracts? Are you trying to pursue grants? Are you a federal government entity trying to do business with other federal government entities? Or are you some combination of the above? The purpose of registration for our company here, Gorman Manufacturing, is focused on doing business in the contracts realm. So what I want to do is show you what it would look like if you wanted to change it. So the way it asks, it says, what kind of entity are you? And you've got, when you're first creating a record, you have options of being different. Are you state government, local government, business organization? Most entities are business or organization. Your purpose is for the whole contracts versus grants and federal assistance. If you say yes, that I'm really here because I'm pursuing contracts, I want procurement opportunities, that's where I want to go, you will have to provide all of the information within SAM. If you said no, then you notice that the option to just go for grants and federal assistance comes open. And if you say yes to that, you would only have to then provide what's called core data and points of contact. You would not have to do the representations and certifications, which is what used to be in ORCA, all the FAR clauses, or the assertions, and we'll go through all that. I just wanted to show you what that looked like, but really we're going to focus on the contracts. All right, now Sam is going to tell you what I just told you, which is that you're going to have to complete all 4 sections of SAM, that you are pursuing all awards. And again, just being registered in SAM doesn't mean that you're guaranteed business from the government, but you're eligible then to go out and apply. So we're going to provide information in 4 categories today: core data, assertions, which is information about the business that will be used later, and the representations and certifications and points of contact. All right. Each section in SAM is laid out the same way. You've got the page header at the top and what your firm is, what your entity, so your name, your DUNS number, your cage code, so you know what information, what record you're working on. You're going to see your checklist here down the side, and this will take you through each of the different pages and gives you a summary of what information is on each page. You can move around between pages, but it's easier just to go straight through in order. And as we go through the pages, ones that we've completed and that have passed all the validation rules on there, we'll have a green checkbox. So since we're updating our record, we're just going to look at the information and make sure it's still valid. If for any reason your physical address had changed since you last were in SAM or since you were last in CCR, you need to work with Dun & Bradstreet to make sure to update the address associated with your DUNS number. And when that has happened, you can come back into SAM and click the Refresh Dun & Bradstreet Data button, and that will give you the new information. So we're going to look, we see that the information matches. And we're going to move through to the business information screen. All right, on the business information screen, the basic required information deals with when your business started and what your fiscal year-end close date is, and this is just tailored to your entity, so this DUNS number. If you want to provide a division name or a division number or even your corporate website, you're certainly welcome to do that. The congressional district is calculated based on the zip and the zip +4, so you don't have to enter that. The MPIN. The MPIN is essentially a password. It's called the Marketing Partner Identification Number. And it is something that you will need if you're going to be in grants.gov. It'll be used as a password there. If you use the Past Performance Information Retrieval System, PEPRS, it's a password there. It's also used as your electronic signature or password if you're a U.S. domestic registrant on the TIN consent page, the IRS Taxpayer Identification Number consent page, which will be the next one. In other words, it's an important number. You write it, you make it up, you will need it. Treat it like a password. Keep it safe. All right, so you see the physical address populates from the Dun & Bradstreet provided information. The mailing address, you can use the same thing, or you can create a separate address, like a P.O. box if you want to use that for mailing. Something else in SAM, anytime you see these little blue bars with the arrows, that means it's a collapsible thing, and so it can open and close if you wanted to add additional addresses. When you get to the taxpayer identification number, again, this only applies to U.S. domestic registrants. You will have 2 options for your taxpayer identification number, your TIN type. And the first one is the employer identification number, your EIN, assigned by the IRS. And the second is only for sole proprietors who choose to use their Social Security number as their TIN. It's pretty rare, but if they do, they are allowed to use their SSN as their TIN in the system for registration and TIN consent purposes. Now, there is a external process that happens when you've given the information about your taxpayer identification number. Your information is sent to the IRS, and it matches against what they have in the database. This IRS consent form is where you acknowledged and say that it's okay to do that. Now, you have to say it's okay to do that if you want to complete your registration if you're a U.S. domestic entity, but this is where you actually give the validation to proceed. Your taxpayer identification number is pre-populated from the previous screen. You don't need to enter that again. A note about the taxpayer name: it is not necessarily exactly what's your Dun & Bradstreet legal business name. It is whatever is on your tax forms, so your W-2s, your 1099s, whatever you use to file taxes, that's the name you have to put there. So maybe my Dun & Bradstreet, my legal business name is Gorman Manufacturing Incorporated. Well, maybe my IRS taxpayer name is Gorman Manufacturing Inc. It really is that important. You have to make sure it matches exactly what is on your tax forms. Some people have asked, why is the information grayed out? If you made a change on the previous page and modified the information about your tax payer information, then you would have the opportunity to change this in here. But since I did not modify anything, it is grayed out, so I can't update it. All right, since we are updating our registration, we do already have a cage code. It's there, and that will be validated during the registration process. All right, the general information section. The general information section deals with types of information about your business, your entity, where you are incorporated. It is up to you, unless there is a red asterisk, up to you how much information you want to put in here. You know, the more complete picture you provide, the more useful it can be to government entities looking to give you business. And so that's always worthwhile for that level. All of them are going to have little drop downs. They're going to be able to add and select. The full list and description you see on the right here. If you have questions on what terms mean while you're on the page, there is this pop-out glossary that has the definitions for all of them. So if you want to know what domestic shelter means, it's got the actual definition. Usually, if they're prescribed in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, then it's straight from the FAR. But those are the exact definitions and the regulatory source for where you would find more information. When you see boxes like this on SAM, if you select one, you want to hit Add, it pops over into the next box. If you select it again and remove, it goes back over here. These are your options. If you happen to qualify as being any of those kinds of entities, you may select it. But again, be very careful and make sure you understand what the requirements are to qualify before you select it, because it will become part of your record. All right, and you can keep going through the different business types. You've got the socioeconomic categories. Again, these all relate very much to different kinds of set-asides, different procurement regulations and rules. In short, you can determine what it is you are and add or remove as necessary. These things will show up later in your representations and certifications as well. where you will actually attest to the validity of what you've entered in context with the specific FAR provisions. When you get to the financial information page, this is one of those really, really important sections in SAM. If you're a U.S. domestic entity or even a foreign entity that has a U.S. bank account, for U.S. domestic entities, you have to provide this information. If you're a foreign registrant, but you have a U.S. bank account, you can provide it, but you don't have to. It is optional. When you pick the type of bank account, it's either checking or savings, the number that you enter, the ABA routing number, that will generate the name of the financial institution. So that comes from a file at Treasury. Then you provide your account number, and that is where the federal government financial systems get their information that then sends your payment, and that's why you want it to be accurate. So people ask, how often do you update SAM? You're required to update it annually, but it's one of those things where if something changes, like your bank account number, or you've switched banks altogether, it's in your best interest to update your registration record more frequently based on the information itself. When you go through the remittance address and the other information relating to how to get paid, you want to pay close attention to the format guidance. You know, you really do have to put the parenthesis and then no space and then a dash. The remittance address is, again, one of those very important data elements because that's who a federal agency will contact if they have specific questions about the financial information. So you want to make sure that that address is accurate. All right, the next 2 pages, executive compensation and proceedings. These are required by Transparency Act and various other regulations where you have to answer screening questions, kind of qualification questions. And if you don't meet the conditions of those questions, you don't have to provide any additional information. For our scenario, I'm saying no, that 80% of my revenue did not come from federal contracts last year, and I did not make more than $25 million. That's the screening threshold. If you said yes, you would see that you had the option to go to the next one, and the next question just says, can the public already get to the information? If they can, that's great, you move on. If they can't, then if you saved and continued, you would provide the 5 names and amounts of the topmost highly compensated executives in your organization. But again, it's a pretty high threshold to hit 25 million and 80% of that coming from federal contracts or grants. The proceedings questions, you need to read the questions very carefully to see if there's the appropriate clause in your contract. It really relates to whether or not you've had any criminal, civil, or administrative proceedings. And if so, then you have to provide information. All right, the information opt-out. This is specific to searching. If you say, I authorize my information to be displayed in SAM's public search, then anybody going to SAM, going to the Search Records tab, can search and they can find your information. If you say no, for any reason you don't want your information to easily located, you have to either be a federal government user with an account to find it, but it's not prevented from being released as part of Freedom of Information Act. So again, this pertains just to the public search, and if you don't want it to be displayed in public search, that's fine. But if you're applying for certain SBA programs, you need to have it displayed. Read the language on the page. Most people are going to say yes, go ahead and display it in the public search. And we are almost done. You're going to review the core data. Every section in SAM has the ability, when you get to the review section, to expand and collapse. When you expand it, you can actually go back to that section and edit it if you want. Otherwise, you need to move on. And we'll go to the next section. So remember, we are updating a contract-oriented registration. So we're going to go through all 4 sections. I am going to have to start talking a little faster so that we can at least get through the sections and you can see what they are. At the end of each section, it's going to ask whether you want to go to the next section. If you say no, it doesn't mean that you're done. It just means that you can come back later and finish if you needed to go get other information or you ran out of time, whatever that case is. The Assertions section, the information you provide in this section is going to be used in Reps and Certs, in several other places, to help determine what you measure up against in terms of size. The Small Business Administration has size standards. They're matched against NAICS codes, the North American Industrial Classification System. NAICS codes can be added on this screen. You see that I've already got several on the right-hand side. You can search by a partial NAICS code. It would pull up any NAICS code that had that character combination in it. You mark 1 as your primary, that's what you specialize in, and you can go. You can also do product and service codes if you choose, but you don't have to. Then by each NAICS code, the calculations are made by the amount, your receipts, your 3-year average earnings essentially, and your employee average, which is a yearly average. For this purpose, we're about a little over 500,000 and about 25 employees. That is what they take and say for the different NAICS, is it a size, so is it employee-based determination whether you would be a small business or not for that NAICS code, or is it a revenue or receipts-based whether you would be a small business for that NAICS code. The final determination is made at the time of award by the contracting officer. But it's important to capture the information in SAM. The electronic data interface, you may or may not ever need to use this. It's a format for transmitting information. It's not used that often anymore. Disaster relief, this doesn't mean you want to qualify for disaster relief. It means in case of disaster, you're able to come out and help with debris removal, construction, emergency services, that kind of thing. It's more of a disaster relief registry that FEMA would then search and use in SAM. And then you're going to review the assertion section, again focusing on the NAICS code that you selected, as well as the receipts and employee averages, because that's what will be used to calculate your small business size indicator. We now have the option to move forward to the representations and certifications section. And this is the extremely detail-intensive section because these are the actual provisions from the FAR. So Sam will ask you a series of questions. You can add information as necessary. If you have a question about what the FAR provision actually says, there are links at the end of each question so you can go reference it and make sure that you're answering it in the appropriate context. They're all conditional, where if you say yes, then you get to add new things. Again, you've got the little arrows. If you see that, you can open it as an expandable box. Since I am just updating my record, I know that my responses are correct. If you were doing this for the first time, you would take a bit more time to make sure to read them all and understand the context. But you just go through. There are 4 pages of questions and answers. The SAM user guide describes each question. The links to the FAR are there, and you've got the option to review them in detail. I want to move through this section relatively quickly because I want to get to the review page at the end, because I want you to see what the information looks like when it's placed in context of the FAR provisions, because that's what a contracting officer would see. That's what that's what a government official would see when they're looking to see if you've completed Section K of your solicitation. This table is something that will become familiar to you. When you entered those NAICS codes back in the assertions section, we said that we were, our primary focus is metal can manufacturing. We also provide consulting services to other metal can manufacturers, and we train metal can manufacturers around the globe. Now you see the size standard. Remember our 25 employees and our $550,000 3-year average? Well, the metal can manufacturing NAICS code size standard says any organization that specializes in this NAICS code and has fewer than 1,000 employees is considered small. So our 25, we certainly are qualified as small. When you look at the others, they are receipts-based. They're looking at the amount your organization earns. So our $550,000, again, puts us small for those NAICS codes. Depending on what NAICS code is used at the time of award, the contracting officer will look and make the determination based on what they find in SAM. Let's say you decide later that you want to branch out and I want to find new opportunities. If I put a proposal in and I suddenly thought orange groves would be the next big thing, I can click that View More button and I can see what my receipts and employee numbers would look like against any NAICS code in existence. I would see that I would qualify, I would be considered small for those NAICS codes. And so that is actually a very powerful tool that contracting officers can use as well. If you didn't pick NAICS codes that they were interested in, they could see whether or not your small business indicator would lean towards that. All right. All right, on the last page, you again go through reading the questions, consulting the FAR, determining whether or not your responses are accurate, and save and continue. There are 2 more pages in the Reps and Certs section. If you had entered a NAICS code that was specific to either architecture or engineering, there would be additional questions you would have to complete. Since the NAICS codes that we entered were not, we don't have to do that page. And then the last page, last set of information, speaks to, are you interested in Defense Department contracts? If so, you've got a series of DoD-focused provisions and clauses that you need to respond to. Since we're saying we are not, we do not have to respond to the DFARS provisions. Now we're at the all-important review, reps, and certs. And I say all-important because in SAM, this is the most legally binding section. This is where if you have represented yourself inaccurately, you can be held liable for it. There are a series of provisions that you just have to read and say that you've read them, and that's the first list up here. You would click on these and it would take you to the page. You would read the text, and that's what you would do. Then you get into the information where you provided information on the questionnaire. So each of these opens up. It tells you what you provided, and you get to see in context whether you see the little gray check mark there, whether you did or did not intend how you responded to the question. One of the most important sections is your small business program representations. Within that, you would see, again, that's that NAICS table. And when you're representing, and when you submit this registration, you're not just representing that the information is accurate on this small table of what you've selected. You're saying that I've actually provided accurate receipts and employee numbers that could be used on that whole table, on the entire NAICS table. Which again works to your advantage if a contracting officer is interested in finding you an opportunity or working with you on an opportunity for a NAICS code that wasn't one that you primarily selected. They would get to see what your small business indicator said with that NAICS code. This is the little language I was talking about. You know, this is the legally binding part of the registration. You really need to make sure that you do understand it and that what you're entering is correct. We're now moving to the last part of the registration, and this is the points of contact. Of all the things in SAM, points of contact probably are the ones that change the most. And you can go in at any time and update points of contact and not have to update the entire record. But it's important to keep this accurate because, again, this is what federal agencies use to reach out and contact you. That's why they're called points of contact. There are a few mandatory points of contact. Just across the board, everybody has to have one. There are a few that are mandatory if you provide other information. The accounts receivable point of contact is absolutely mandatory. You have to have it. The electronic business point of contact, absolutely mandatory. You have to have it. Same with the government business point of contact. Other systems use some of these points of contact in different ways as well. So again, very key. A tip when going through your record from CCR for the first time, CCR used to store all the names in one field. And so you would see John Doe there just in the first name field. SAM allows for breakout. If you thought you were done, you hit submit, save and continue, and you got an error, it's worth checking to see if there were any names like that that hadn't been split out. So that's key. Also, CCR had more mandatory kinds of points of contact, so you may have a lingering point of contact rolled up here that you didn't see that you need to get rid of. If, based on the information we had provided, there were other points of contact we needed to give, SAM would tell us. It really does tailor what you need to do to the thing. Okay, the error that you're seeing at this step in the production system, there's a link that's generated that allows you to go to the Small Business Administration's page and provide information about your supplemental information about your entity. And that is part of the Dynamic Small Business Search. It's a separate program. It takes you outside of SAM. It is not mandatory as part of the SAM registration process. It is mandatory for certain small business programs. You would see a link and it would allow you to go there. If you wanted to come back later, you could do the same thing by going to your SBA profile. And again, because we're in the demonstration system, that's not going to take us to that page, but that would be how you would get back to it if you needed to. So what we're doing now is scrolling through and seeing the entire registration. We're at the very last step. We can, again, collapse everything like we've done before. We can look at our responses to any specific section of our registration. We can go back and edit it if we want to. Please make sure that when you get to this part, you actually hit submit. It would be tragic to get all the way through the registration process, get distracted, walk away, think you're done, and not actually be done. You've got to get to the end, hit the submit button, hopefully get the confirmation screen back that you've submitted your registration or your update, and then you know that you've completed the registration. So what happens next? You've completed it, you've submitted it. Now Sam sends it off for those external validations that we talked about, where it goes to the IRS, it goes to the Defense Logistics Agency, where they validate the cage code information. So it could take 3 days, 5 days, longer, depending on what information either gets caught or if there's more information needed at any one of those steps. Sam will email you and notify you if you pass or fail either of them. In particular, I would recommend that you keep an eye out for any emails coming from a cage email address, and it would always end in dla.mil, because if there are any questions during the cage validation process, they're going to tell you what information they need, and that would allow you then to provide that. At this point, we are complete with the live demo.